welcome back to this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Brody. I am solo today. Tony and Nick will be back tomorrow with more Bulls news, and Tony and I might be back with some Bears news if anything happens this afternoon. Things are starting to move for the Chicago Bears front office, especially the head coach candidate pool is getting a little crazy, especially after this wild card weekend. A few Bears candidates were in the spotlight this past wild card weekend, especially the offensive playing perspective, and some stocks of the candidates dropped significantly, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think you guys know who I'm talking about, but who would you rather have from an offensive standpoint, Byron Leftwich or Brian Daboll? We'll break down how each of the offenses did this past postseason in each game as well. It really brings out exactly who should be the guy that the Bears should be going for after, and I will share my opinion on who I want. I think a lot of you guys know who that is, especially if you follow me on Twitter, but stay tuned for that. And finally, there is a new front runner for head coach, even that was reported before yesterday's game, so stay tuned for that. That could change over the next couple hours, but want to get this out there and give you guys a little bit of perspective. So let's start off with Daboll versus Leftwich. Now, this past weekend, both of them played and lost in two very crazy offensive games, thanks to bad defensive schemes from both sides of the ball. Both their teams also, both offensive coordinators from Tampa Bay and Buffalo, so Leftwich and Daboll, and defensive coordinators from Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles and Leslie Frazier from Tampa and Buffalo, have all been interviewing with the Bears. The defensive stock plummeted. The offensive stock rose like crazy. So let's break down Brian Daboll first. Game one against the New England Patriots. The Bills had 482 total yards, 308 being passing, 174 being rushing. And the impressive part is 8.9 yards per play. That is something that the Bears were not able to do well at all this year. I mean, in any of those categories, but the yard per play really stuck out. Now, here's where things get even juicier. And this is where I think Daboll is the better candidate. 6 for 7 on third downs against the New England Patriots. So on third down conversions, that is very impressive. The Bears, obviously this year, so many third downs where they had momentum going into drives and either ended it in field goal or practically nothing and lost the Bears games. So very frustrating from a Bears fan perspective, but that is a number that you want to see. And of course, the cherry on top is that they scored 47 points against Bill Belichick and the Patriots. So let's go to game two against the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes obviously ripped up the Buffalo defense, won in overtime over some I know a lot of people are, kind of looking at the overtime rules like, I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like Buffalo maybe could have had more of a chance. But overall, the Chiefs ripped up the Bills. But I'm focusing on Brian Daboll's performance, which was very impressive against a very strong Kansas City defense. The game two against the Chiefs, they had 422 total yards, so 60 yards less against arguably a better defense in Kansas City, 313 passing yards and 109 rushing yards, 6.7 yards per play. Still very impressive. That means that you're able to, get a first down on average within 2 plays. A lot of big plays by Josh Allen in this game. I'm going to get more into his total stats in a bit, but they were 6 for 14 on third down. So a little less than half, still better than the Bears this year for sure, but they were 4 for 4 on fourth down. And we all know that Matt Nagy this past season loved to just run it up the middle, whether that had been with David Montgomery or Khalil Herbert, and our offensive line could not make the push clearly. I think the Bears only had 2 fourth down conversions this year. Pretty pathetic on the amount that they took, especially Matt Nagy during the end of the season where he was trying to save his job, which we all know he was out the door. But the Bills also scored 36 points against the Chiefs and took it to overtime. So pretty impressive overall by Brian Daboll's performance. Now let's put it all together. And just to give a perspective, what he did in a 2-game span, total 904 total yards of offense. This is, again, so Josh Allen's stats were a little better, their running backs, everyone's stats were a little better. This is considering yards, yards lost, also sacks going to play, but there was no interceptions by the Bills, and that's something else. But there was 904 total yards this postseason for the Buffalo Bills, 621 being total passing yards, 283 total rushing, 7.8 yards per play average in the postseason. You can't ask for more than that. That's just a big wow, and a big reason why Brian Daboll is a very strong candidate for the Chicago Bears. And here's what's even better. Josh Allen, who Daboll arguably turned around after a rough start to his career, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions against the Chiefs and the Patriots. Just want to reiterate that. The Chiefs and the Patriots defense, 1 at home, the Chiefs away. Josh Allen had 4 touchdown passes against the Chiefs at Arrowhead and 5 touchdowns against the Pats at home. 637 total passing yards, a 95 QBR, very impressive. And he also had 134 rushing yards for a big dude, a guy that, he's arguably a little fast, but Justin Fields is faster. And Justin Fields can definitely do a lot with Daboll as his head coach. And he actually, Daboll works with his quarterbacks. He doesn't say, hey, you're going to do what I'm doing, especially those reports that we heard about Matt Nagy and how he treated Mitchell Trubisky. Let's go to Leftwich, though. Game 1 against the Eagles, 349 total yards, 243 passing yards, 106 rushing yards, and 4.8 yards per play. Not bad. Not as good as Daboll, but pretty good. Almost 5 yards per play against a arguably pretty good Eagles defense. 4 for 13 on third down, though. That's not that good. That's roughly about a little less than 33%. So kind of want to keep that in mind when I'm going into game 2 as well against the Rams. They just didn't show up in the first half. They scored 3 points in the first half, and obviously there was a crazy comeback at the end for the Buccaneers, who still couldn't pull it off, thanks to Todd Boyles having a bad defensive scheme at the end of the game, giving up a huge play, and Matthew Stafford able to win his second game. Shout out to Matthew Stafford. Very well-deserved, especially after all those years in Detroit. But against the Rams, 359 total yards, 308 of those were passing. Total passing yards, and 500, that'd be cool if it was 551 rushing yards. So 5.1 yard per play, a little bit better than the game against the Eagles, arguably, but 3 for 14 on third down and 2 for 4 on fourth down. That hurts a little bit. Again, still impressive to convert on fourth down. But again, the first half of that game, they just did not look like they wanted to show up. The Rams defense was overpowering for this arguably a very strong Buccaneers offense, especially with Tom Brady as quarterback and all the weapons that are involved. And that offensive line, very impressive offensive line down in Tampa Bay. So in total, 708 total yards for Tampa Bay, 551 of them were total passing and 157 total rushing. So 4.95 yard per play. Still not horrible, not as good as Brian Daboll, though. And I think that Daboll went up against harder competition in both games. Obviously, going against Leftwich, going against a very strong Rams defense is no joke. Not terrible, but again, that first half of that Rams game really hurt him, and the third down conversions is what worries me. So who am I taking? I kind of think I've made my point clear, is Brian Daboll is just he's my guy. That's who I think the Bears should be going after. I know that we did not get Joe Shane from the Buffalo Bills, the assistant chief general manager, who went to New York. That kind of worries me that he's going to bring Daboll to New York with him, because Daboll can be hired today now that the Bills have been eliminated from playoff contention. But the third and fourth down conversions, it's not even the yards, it's not the touchdown passes, it's not the no interceptions, which all those are extremely impressive. And that's something that's very exciting for the Bears. But it's the third and fourth down conversions that really made my eyes pop and go, wow, this guy definitely knows how to take risks, how to read defenses, and go against certain teams. So we need that very badly here in Chicago. And again, he has a mobile quarterback in Justin Fields who can run a 4.44 40 at the NFL Combine this past season. So I really think, and Allen's not as mobile as him, so I think that Justin Fields could blossom very well under Brian Daboll. Topic number 2, this is going to be super quick. Again, this is a quick episode. Leslie Frazier and Todd Boyle's stock both plummeted this past weekend, especially after all that they gave up against this weekend. Again, they went against the Chiefs and the Rams, 2 very good teams who both could be in the Super Bowl after next weekend's games. But if you want to be the best of the best and you want to be a head coach, you have to put on your game face and go out there. And, they did, but Leslie Frazier they just fell apart at the end of that Kansas City game. In my opinion, it was intense. Patrick Mahomes went crazy, but I think that his stock plummeted. And personally, I think that Daboll is the better candidate out of Buffalo. I hope that they don't take Frazier just because Daboll goes, if he ends up going somewhere else. And same with Todd Boyles. Todd Boyles wasn't the greatest head coach either when he was with the New York Jets. So that kind of also worries me as well. And he did okay, I guess. Again, the Rams are a very strong defense, but that final play kind of reminded me of how the Bears secondary was this past year and playing a lot of zones. So overall, that's what I wanted to hit on in regards to coaching candidates that have plummeted. And finally, there's been news that came out from Albert Breer this past weekend. Before the games, just want to put that out there, before this past weekend's games, of who the top candidates are for the Chicago Bears. Matt Eberflus, Colts defensive coordinator, we kind of hit on him a lot this past week. Or last week, is one of the top candidates of the year for the entire league for head coaching positions. He's considered the favorite for the Chicago Bears. And, before last night's games, even after last night's games, I still think he's a very strong candidate. And if we got him, I would be a happy camper, and you should be too, considering he's a very well-respected coordinator around the league, and he can build, and he knows who's a good coordinator, who's going to be on the rise in the next couple of years. He can come and bring him in now and make this Bears team very successful. Could find his own Brian Daboll. Along with that, Jim Caldwell and Leslie Frazier are also still top candidates. I know I just talked poorly about Leslie Frazier, but not poorly, but just calling out that he might not be the guy. He's still considered a top candidate for the Chicago Bears. Good to see Doug Peterson's name off that list, though, as Tony and I do not want Doug Peterson, as he is just a quote unquote purified Matt Nagy. So again, quick episode today. There might be more news coming out later today. This was filmed at 10:57 or ending film at 10:57 a.m. Central Time on Monday, January 24, 2022. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram for all updated Bears news. We will be going there. But with that, thank you very much for joining this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Brody. We'll see you guys tomorrow.